Welcome, my friends. I'm Dave Champion. This is my talented co-host, Bill Carnes, and together we are totally unprepared. You know, it's been a couple weeks since we were together.
It was.
And I've got to tell you, I always watch the show after we're done. Oftentimes I cut it up and I throw it on the appropriate parts on the Dave Champion's Liberty page. And you know, I didn't really realize it. We recorded that on a Monday.
Correct.
I was sick all that week, and I didn't realize it was already trying to get me. And then I watched the show, and I realized I was silent almost the whole show. I let you carry the ball, but I didn't realize it when we were recording until I watched it. And my whole thing that Monday was like, right. But I didn't even realize I was starting to get sick that day.
It's funny because I am probably at least 4 episodes, keeping in mind we haven't done a whole bunch in the last month or so.
Right, you've been tied up?
I have been. As a matter of fact, last week we did not record the show. The only day I had available was Monday. And having worked 5 days and then expecting a 6-day week and only 1 day off in between, I'm sorry, I was just not dedicated enough to come in here totally unprepared.
Right.
I needed a break because my day, I spend 3 hours in the car, half of it commuting in, half of it commuting back.
Yeah. Well, when you work, you take a 12-day stretch, you have 1 day off.
Yeah.
You don't need to spend it here.
So this week I have a 2-day stretch in being off.
So here you are.
And 1 day is here, the other day it's going to be back in Vegas where I've been spending my days recently.
Yeah.
Anyhow, let's talk about a couple of things.
Okay.
We were going to start, let's see,
some traffic enforcement
here in town, the traffic. We know that we've got traffic cops now, right?
Yes.
We've got the motorcycle cops that are around. And of course, a motorcycle cop's job is usually twofold. One, write as many bullshit tickets as you possibly can is revenue generation.
Absolutely. It is not at all about public safety.
No, it has to do with
pitch, but that's not what it is
a
about.
violation of black ink on white paper.
Right.
And then the other one is respond to accidents and write reports.
Yeah.
That's usually their...
I haven't even seen them do any of that because they're primarily working 160 and 372, which are state highways. So when there's an accident, NHP takes the report. Now, this is one of these weird things because I know one of the two guys that's working motors, and he's a lovely deputy. But yet I can.
Yet the other one is a complete and utter total douchebag.
I've not met the second one.
Oh, yes, you have.
Have I?
Isn't he the tool that
arrested
me?
No. He's apparently not doing that anymore.
Oh, okay.
So I don't want to name the deputies that are working that detail now.
Okay,
but,
gotcha. Okay.
One of them is a very lovely guy. The other one I just don't know. I've never met him. So, but I found out some information on what they're doing based on somebody who has access to what they're actually citing people for. And I was appalled because, Nye County is one of the poorest counties in America. So
Yes, thank you, James Hoskinson, for making sure that our taxes were raised by $1.5 billion in your own area.
Yeah. So I was appalled when Sharon Worley decided to fix her screwed up budget on the backs of the people who drive in town, rather than go to the county commission and say, look, I've screwed up and I need more money. Instead of that, she puts these, again, she's a very nice deputy, but as far as the job is concerned, she's putting these vultures out there to prey on the drivers.
Yeah, the voters.
Yes, the voters, who I hopefully will remember that. So I found out some of the things that they're citing for, and I was appalled because none of them are safety issues. They're just, as you said earlier, black words on white paper. And Americans should never be held hostage to black letters on white paper. Because we're supposed to live in a land of freedom. So if you're going to get...
Black letters matter.
If you're going to get pulled into the criminal justice system, it should be because you did something that's unsafe, not because you had a trivial regulatory violation. And of course, what many people don't understand, you and I do, is that when you receive a traffic citation, you have literally been arrested. Okay? The only difference is, rather than putting handcuffs on you, taking you out of your car, transporting you to the police station, booking you, as an alternative to that, it's called citation in lieu of arrest. You're allowed to sign and show back up on another occasion. But legally speaking, you are arrested. The officer has effected an arrest of you, and he's inducted you into the criminal justice system the minute he asks you to write that, to put your signature on that form. So that, to me, you better have done something wrong, not just some little technical violation. So let me tell you a few of these things these guys are doing. you come down one of the county roads and you make a left onto State Highway 160. When you make your left, there are two lanes, the far left-hand lane and the right-hand lane. Okay.
The law says you need to turn into the closest travel lane. So if you're turning left, that means the far left lane.
Right.
Far too often people will drift into the inside lane. Maybe they need to make another turn,
right,
but without signaling or doing the proper way, they just turn into it.
Right. Now, at the particular intersection where I know they've been banging out a lot of these tickets, I sat and watched the other day, and about 80% of the cars, because of the way that intersection is structured, about 80% of the cars don't turn right into the immediate left lane. They go into the second lane closest to the businesses. And this is not a hotbed of accidents. This is not, I understand corrective behavior when you've got a problem. This is not a hotbed of accidents. People do it, as I said, I watched for a couple of light signals, and about 80% of the people very naturally do this. So all they're doing is they're going out there and preying on people and say, open your wallet. I mean, the officers, they do it through their procedure, but basically say, open your wallet and give us some money because Sharon Worley, the current sheriff, has screwed up the budget and we need some of your money. The other one is, as you're continuing down State Highway 160, you get to 372, if you want to make a right, there's some...
In front of the Bank of America.
Correct. There's some space where I couldn't do it in my vehicle, but if you've got a smaller vehicle, you can pull alongside the person who's in the right-hand lane and make your right turn. Completely safe. But I guess Nevada has some law in its vehicle code that allows them to write that for two cars in one lane. Okay? Why you would write this when it is more productive to getting traffic moving, right? Traffic's all backed up, guy squeaks to the right, makes his right, the next guy comes along, makes his... Why you would want to pickpocket that person? Okay.
I've actually argued at that very spot in that very right turn that across the street coming off of 372 onto 160, there is a dedicated right turn lane with
Correct.
an island.
Yeah.
And that should be duplicated over here because far more people are going eastbound on 160 that then need to turn south, or actually, it's technically east, turn west, turn right in front of the B of A. They should duplicate that because there's a whole bunch of area that there's just open rock, garden plant area, bullshit, whatever. They should
hardscape.
Yeah, they should mow through that and have a right turn lane going on.
And then lastly, while I find them all offensive, I think this last one I find the most offensive. And that is, on both sides of 160, in what we would consider like the middle of town, there is a bike lane on either side. Now, we've both lived here quite some time. How many people do you see cycling on 160?
I don't know if I've ever seen it, with the exception of, never seen it.
There is one rather slender black gentleman who dresses up in like the riding attire, the stuff that's supposed to cut the wind, and he hauls butt up and down there, okay? One guy.
I haven't seen it.
We've got a town of about 33,000 people. One guy uses that bike lane that I've seen, right? And it's now and again. But here's, very naturally, we were all taught when we were young, if you're going to make a right turn, get out of as much as you can out of the flow of traffic, as hard to the curb as you can without hitting the curb, and then make your right turn into the driveway or side street that you want to turn onto. Well, if you actually do what everyone was taught to do, they're giving you a ticket for driving in the bicycle lane, okay? What they want you to do, apparently, so what you would have to do so that they can't tag you for this, is you would have to stay in your traffic lane, slow down. Now remember, if you're not going into the bicycle lane, you have to really slow down because you're making a complete 90-degree turn, right? Slow down to almost zero on a state highway and then make your turn at a sharp 90-degree angle. So you're going laterally across the lane. You're not actually driving ever in the bicycle lane. This is just thievery that the sheriff is doing, and it's terrible to be doing to the citizens of this town.
We know for a fact this is nothing but revenue generation, because you either go in and pay the ticket, or you go into court on, you said schedule an arraignment date, you go into court, and this is actually the smarter thing to do, especially if you're actually guilty of this. And you talked with the assistant district attorney, the ADA comes up and offers on all of these, we will reduce this to a parking ticket, a parking violation, but charge you the full fine amount. So it's not about teaching you a lesson because you did something wrong. It's about getting the money. Look, if it's actually a moving violation, you might very well get points on your driver's license. Your insurance rates go up. County's not interested in seeing all that happen. They don't want to see all that. They just want their cut. So virtually every traffic ticket that you can get, if you go to the court and you schedule an arraignment date and you show up, the ADA will talk with you and say, look, okay, we're going to offer you a parking ticket and pay the full amount of the fine. It might be $110, it might be $270, somewhere's in between, might be more. But that's the way it goes. You'll still have to be paying, but you won't get the points.
You know,
and the judges are totally cool with this. They don't care.
Yeah. I was at a public meeting not long ago, and this came up at the public meeting. And I made a comment such as, this is nothing but legalized extortion being used by the sheriff to pad her budget. And I hope you'll remember this at election time. One of the commissioners was there, and he was like, so afterwards, I asked him, I said, what's the deal? He says, well, you know, there's some legitimate enforcement of this going on. For instance, on my street, the speed limit is, and people are exceeding that speed limit, and there's children in the neighborhood. So, you know, we don't want to condemn this. I said to him, have you ever seen, since the beginning of this motor cop program, have you ever seen one of these motor cops on your street fixing your problem? No. Yeah. I said, then what are we talking about? Yeah. Why are we like, tone it down, when we're calling a spade a spade? You know, it's insane.
Spade indeed. I was never, when I was a cop, I was never one of these traffic enforcement kind of guys.
Nor was I.
Because that's motorcycles, as tickets and accidents, right? That's what you do. I had a guy that I worked with on one squad once upon a time, and when we were working a modified day shift, and when the swing shift guys came on, we had about another 2 hours that we were on the street. So when they came on, we could do officer-initiated stuff. Inevitably, this guy would grab a radar, check a radar gun out in the day, and he'd sit and he'd tag people. And I used to berate him every day. Mike, what are you doing, man? What are you doing? That's for the motorcycle. It's officer initiated, and you're sitting there playing with your radar gun. What is this, a bottle rocket
Use your
song?
discretionary time to go after criminals.
Yes.
Yes, and you know, I always cited people only when I saw them do something hellaciously unsafe.
As did I.
Other than that, you got a warning.
Yeah. We'll be right back.
All righty, we are back. Wait for it. All righty. What is up with people wanting to bring government more and more into every single aspect of our lives simply because, well, there's a problem, and I think this should be the solution to the problem, is more government. And I'm going to share something with you that is probably going to be fairly unpopular. That is, I absolutely, positively oppose voter ID laws. Now, people are saying, but Dave, what about all the voter fraud? Okay, let me break this down to some reality, and I will share with you my reasoning. First of all, Bill and I have talked about it till we're blue in the face on the show, that the public's perception of things is oftentimes at odds with the facts. The public doesn't particularly care what the facts are. They just want to do this. And voter fraud is one of those issues. If you talk to the public, they would tell you that it's a huge problem and it's changing the course of elections. Reality is the research that has been done shows that it's almost non-existent. That's how small the problem actually is, that it's almost non-existent. When researchers have gone out and performed the research, it's this big a problem. It's one of these things where it's this big a problem in reality, and it's this big a problem in the public perception. So again, it's addressing a problem that is hypothetical by far more than actual. So why are we getting the government involved in a little tiny problem? Only because we're out of our minds and we think it's something that it's not. Secondly, and of course, the people on the right are the ones typically screaming for this because they are absolutely convinced those leftists are cheating us in the polls every single election. The leftists, they're coming in there voting 10 times. This is what I hear from people on the right, and actual research shows That's not true. It's fantasy stuff. And the left has their fantasies, don't get me wrong, but this is a fantasy of the people on the right. Secondly, we have much bigger fish to fry than a couple of people doing something wrong at the polling place. And Bill and I are going to talk about this in a little bit, which is the problem with computerized voting and the liability that exists for having our elections completely, the election results completely changed by one guy with a computer with no ability to discern we've been had. That is a real problem as opposed to this fake problem. Lastly, I don't know about you, but as a free man, you need to show ID as you go around to do everything. Usually it's government ID, right? Can I see your ID? And they don't mean your Costco card, okay? Your government ID. It disgusts me in a free country that if you don't have this thing where the government tells other people who you are, you can't function. I find that utterly disgusting. And now we want to bring it into voting. But is there another way to handle it? I believe there is. We don't live in the 1950s anymore. We live in the 21st century. We have technology. I believe that there should be cameras and video should be shot in the polling place. Not what is pushed. The camera should never be able to see the screen, but they should be able to see who is voting and when they logged in. So you walk in the voter booth, there's a camera facing you. Your face is on record, okay? Who you voted for is not, but your face is. At the same thing when you went to check in, your face, the whole thing is recorded. And what you do, instead of having this government ID, you have to show everybody all over the place to move through society. Instead of that, you make it like 15 years at hard labor, and I mean at hard labor, making big rocks into little rocks with a sledgehammer. Okay? None of this, cushy stuff in the federal pen, these places where you play tennis. I'm talking about real hardcore prisons. You spend 15 years in prison, mandatory sentence upon conviction, with no chance of parole if you commit election fraud. If you go into a polling place and you vote more than once, or if you present yourself to be somebody other than you are, or you're not registered to vote and you do vote. Any of those things that happen willfully, I don't mean a guy thinks he's registered to vote and he made a mistake, okay? We don't want to send people to jail for 15 years at hard labor because they had an oopsie. But if it can be shown, which I think in 99.999% of the cases it's not difficult at all, it show the person did it willfully, intentionally, and knowingly. Once they're convicted in court, you send them to 15 years at hard labor. That solves it, because I don't care what your political persuasion, I don't care whether you're hard right, hard left, you want this particular ballot measure to win or this politician, you are not going to walk in, show your face to the camera, and commit voter fraud when the penalty, if you get caught, is 15 years of your life at hard labor. And those are the reasons that I do not support more government in more parts of our life. This one singular issue that I'm happening to bring up now, voter ID. Bill.
Do you remember the original cast of Saturday Night Live? And they do the news desk.
Of course.
And Dan Aykroyd, it was so funny because he'd say, "Jane, you ignorant slut."
Yeah.
That's the way he'd go through, right? So, certainly not to that level. But I want to say that I think you just contradicted yourself and painted yourself through a more complex maze. Let's eliminate showing an ID, but let's put in all these other things that are even more so in the government's hands. And let me explain why. Already voting is controlled by local government areas. We're not getting out of that. So showing an ID, which we already have to have for other stuff, and I realize it would be nice to not have to do that. Like, I support the idea of concealed weapons reciprocity throughout the country as an act of Congress, but I see that as a Band-Aid to what truly should be. The government shouldn't be involved in that. We have the Second Amendment. But the way that things are actually operating, we need that. It would be better to back the truck up and get rid of all the garbage to make it to where we don't need that. But we'd still have the same rights respected throughout. This, I see, is one of those things. I would rather them show the ID, which is an ounce of prevention, rather than a pound of cure, because you and I both know there's no such thing as hard labor in this country.
There used to be.
There used to be, but there's not anymore.
There could be.
It won't come back.
All they have to do is pass law. There's nothing constitutionally barring it.
There is cruel and unusual punishment that you know as well as I do. The courts are going to strike that down. You know that the liberal courts are going to strike that down.
I don't necessarily believe that.
I truly do. Because otherwise there'd be some kind of hard labor for at least somebody out there.
The Eighth Amendment only says the punishment has to be proportional. Okay? In other words, for a traffic ticket, you can't be called upon to do 20 years in prison.
Okay, so someone voting for under a dead guy's name is not proportional.
It is, and here's why. Because it's not the way you characterize it. What that person is really doing is undermining the entire democratic process of our country. It's not just doing that. He's undermining everything that our country stands for as far as our democratic process of voting. He's undermining he's undermining the credibility and the confidence of the entire nation by doing so. That's pretty weighty. To me, the way I see it, that's like a step down from treason.
Okay, and if you were a whole bunch of judges that are hearing that same argument from yourself, you might agree. But I'm telling you, I don't ever see it that way. And of course, the video cameras, they'd have to go back with the timelines. All of this is reactionary, where the voter ID is preventative.
Right, but hear me out. By putting the cameras in, okay, and you connect them to, we have facial recognition software. I'm not saying that we tag people as far as like their identity.
More government intrusion than you don't want.
No, you're characterizing it incorrectly, because the system would be such that it would flag if the same person showed up. So everyone's voting, and the information is being captured. People coming and going, the information's captured. No human's looking at it, okay? If the system flags the same face twice, it kicks it out to an enforcement officer. So the enforcement officer is investigating. He has probable cause to believe a crime has been committed, and everybody else is not bothered. How much better can you get than that?
I tell you, prevention is worth, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And that prevention happens with the ID. Then they don't have to go through it. Could you imagine how much money and expense would be involved, especially in small communities like ours, and how much it would cost to put that technology in the various voting places?
It's actually very inexpensive with today's
I
technology.
still see that is then you've got more people involved. You're hiring more government people to do stuff, even if it's just for the day or the week leading up to that. I see it as all being completely prevented by showing an ID.
But that requires you now to have to go to the government and say, please verify to people who I am, or I can't function in society.
Okay, and who
that is morally objectionable. The cameras are not.
I would agree to a point. However, who in this society can operate in today's day and age without an ID?
Only because we've allowed it. You talked about with this Second Amendment, we need to roll back all these laws.
I understand.
My point is we need to roll back all of this. And see, technology is making it so much better now, because one of my things that I'd like to see in the future, rather than government IDs, and you're going to like this because you're big on privatization, okay, would be a series of firms, not one, because one can be a problem if you give one all this authority. A series of firms where you register, they're private companies, you register with them, they don't even have, it's like Apple with when you send in a text message via iMessage, they can't read it. Okay, they process it, but they can't read. You sign up with one of these companies, you put all your particulars into this thing. At the outset, there is some verification that all this information is true. Then it goes through an algorithm process, and it assigns you like a string ID, okay? And they issue you some sort of a card, but it's from a private entity, it's not the government, okay? And if somebody wants to know who you are, all they have to do is run this card, run this number. You know, in the future, this is going to freak people out. You know, the chip in the hand thing, you wave your hand. And that number, just like with Apple Pay, nobody can break into it. Nobody can get your information, but it validates who you are without having to go to the state. And to me, being able to prove to somebody in a private, like financial transaction, who I am without the involvement of the state,
Okay.
is the way it should be.
I get it. However, to back the train up as far as it would need to go, to institute this, and then move forward, all to help prevent what there is some voter fraud out there. And, okay, but there still is some.
Yeah.
In lieu of saying, just show us your ID that you already have.
What's to stop them from having false ID?
Why not put in the ID now and then try to back the whole train up and fix the voter problem now?
How about we not keep going down those train tracks? And we'll be back.
What are you looking at? You know what really grinds my gears? You're going to find out. You know what really grinds my gears? This ridiculous, like all presidential election cycles. Everybody's so up in arms about, oh, evil Hillary this, oh, terrible Trump that. Oh, Trump offended me. Oh, it's lying Hillary. And oh no, we need to go third party Gary Johnson. It's bring the big Johnson on. You know what? I'm sick of it. I really am sick of it. Has anybody out there not yet made up their minds? Okay. If you have, all that you're doing on social media is trying to get everybody else on your team. And the thing is in the various like Facebook groups that you belong to or on your own page, you're probably around a whole bunch of like-minded people. So you're preaching to what? The choir, thus wasting everybody else's time. Now, there's been a lot of speculation that anybody voting for Gary Johnson would take away from votes from Donald Trump. So the mantra is a vote for Johnson is a vote for Hillary, or a vote taken from Trump, however you want to look at it. And this mantra is because the last time we had an authentic third-party candidate was, well, in 1992 when Ross Perot took away a whole bunch of votes that would otherwise have gone to George H.W. Bush's reelection campaign, and therefore Bill Clinton won, or at least is the common mantra that's out there in politics. So with that being said, very early on, we're going to bring in my lovely co-host, Dave Champion.
That's got to be a first.
Because we were you were telling me about some sort of statistic just at lunch. We weren't entirely unprepared.
Right.
Just generally unprepared. That there's some research that says there's more Democrats on the left that would otherwise vote for Hillary that are considering Gary Johnson than there are on the right through potential Trump voters.
Right. Well, how this came up is I'm hearing people on different sides of the aisle make claims about voting for a third party. And I notice that those people who support Trump will say a vote for, say, for instance, Gary Johnson is a vote against Trump or in Hillary's favor. And people make those claims. I just discussed this in my rant, right? It doesn't matter whether they're factual, they just do this. So I went and looked it up, and I used very neutral language when I did an internet search for it. I said, which candidate is hurt by a third-party vote? Okay, obviously there's no language in there about Trump or Hillary. And based on the search results, about 90% of the search results showed that the pundits and advisors, it's not actually research because you can't research what hasn't yet happened, but the long-term political activists and political operatives on both parties, about 90% of them say that a vote for a third party will actually harm Hillary, not Trump. And when I pulled out of that, the results from the internet search, when I pulled out these just, third-tier websites that are just trying to get clickbait.
Dudeinthebasement.blog?
Correct. When I took those out, it went from about 90% that said Hillary will be the one that's hurt to probably about 96, 98% Hillary will be the one that's hurt. And I like to do those kind of things because I like to see what people are saying versus, in this case, I think we could say somebody who's been involved in the back of the house type politics thing. those kind of people are the experts. The guy you see at Walmart, you know, the retired guy with the military hat on, you know, the baseball cap and, you know, limping along with his cane, he's not an expert at these things. But the guy who's been 20 years in the trenches fighting political battles, they're the experts. And so the experts say that a vote for Gary Johnson actually hurts Hillary, not Trump. And I always find it interesting how various groups, they have their own little fantasies about this or so. And all they're really doing in most cases, based on what I can see, this guy says it, this guy hears it. Now this guy says it and somebody else hears it. And it just goes on and self-propagating even though it's not true.
Okay, I'm going to look at this from a slightly more pragmatic view. Anybody that I know who has flirted with the idea of voting for Johnson or intends to vote for Johnson, if Johnson wasn't available on the ticket, they would not be voting for Hillary.
Okay.
And I haven't seen anywhere where you get Democrats or the left socialists that would vote for Hillary. They're saying, you know what, maybe I'll vote for the libertarian Johnson guy who's small government, pro-guns, and let's reform a bit of welfare, because those seem to be some big staples in the left's ass, if you will, on why they vote. So from a pragmatic sense, although there might be these people that are in the trenches, I can't really imagine too many people who are on the left that are thinking about Johnson. However, those who are on the right that might think that, you know, I am a diehard, die-in-the-wool GOP establishment type of person. I don't like Trump because he's not establishment. I might go over to the libertarians and vote just because I don't like what they're doing with Trump. Or the people that are far more liberty-minded, like, say, the Ron Paul type of crowd and Rand Paul type of crowd that would say, you know, I get it that Trump is anti-establishment, but he doesn't bring to the table what we want. We want anti-establishment for the right reasons. He's anti-establishment for God knows what reasons. So then I'm a little bit more towards the Johnson.
Let me give you the counterweight to that.
Okay.
What I hear these dyed-in-the-wool Republicans saying about Johnson is they will not vote for him. The reasons are threefold. Number one is that they say, this is their characterization and it's inaccurate, that he wants to gut the military, okay? That he wants to reduce military spending by something like 43%, which is nonsense, okay? But what he does want to do is he wants to take the entire federal budget, which I think all of us would admit, especially Republicans should be admitting, because at least old school Republicans used to believe that government spending was way out of control, right? So anybody who comes along and says, all government spending needs to come down. Entitlement spending, military spending, all operating costs, everything needs to come down because it's out of control. That's what Gary Johnson's pitching, but that's not what I hear Republicans saying. He's got to gut the military. Hang on, I'm not done.
No, I just wanted to caveat on that, okay, in that benefit. Having worked in the federal system, I can tell you, dropping it by 40% is just going to cut out some of the fat that is chewed
the
up.
waste. Yeah.
You could probably drop it more like 60% if it were efficient and still have everything we've got.
Yeah. As an example, if Gary Johnson, I forget the exact percentage that he wants to lower the entire budget, which would include the military, we would go from having a military to spending 10 times what the Russians spend on their military to spending only 6 times what the Russians spend on their military.
Rather than the next 25 countries combined to be like the next 21 countries combined.
Exactly. And the other 2 reasons that Republicans tell me they will never vote for Gary Johnson is he supports TPP and Weld because of the perception of Weld as being significantly anti-gun. Which again, the perception is far greater than the facts. Weld came out long before he was tapped for VP of the Libertarian Party, because Heller was decided in 2008, and he went on the record as praising the Supreme Court's decision on Heller, and the way he characterized was finally giving the American people firm guidance from a legal perspective. I mean, we all know, right?
We know that D.C. isn't paying attention.
Right.
We know Hawaii isn't paying attention. We know California isn't paying attention. We know New York isn't paying attention.
And he has praised Heller and McDonald for the Supreme Court finally stepping up and laying out, at least in part, the proper boundaries of the Second Amendment as far as an individual right and so on. So he's you can't praise Heller and McDonald and be completely anti-gun. I mean, so the perception that the Republicans have that he's this horrible anti-gun guy is just not accurate. But those are the three reasons I hear Republicans tell me, I'll never vote for Gary Johnson. So, and I agree with your estimate, by the way. I think people that are hardcore Hillary fans, there's no way. Bernie supporters?
Hillary could literally stab orphan children and eat them raw on live TV, and her supporters, many of them, will still vote for her. No, they don't care.
Same thing with Trump, though. I mean, and he's the only guy I know that goes on stage and says, I did this wrong. I watched a video of this earlier the week. I did this wrong. I did that wrong. I wish I hadn't. And the crowd erupts in applause.
Well, at least he admits it. And I got to tell you, far too many politicians do not. And I will give you this. At this point in time, I intend to vote for Trump because if he gets in office, I see him as being a wild card. We don't exactly know what to expect. And it might be good, it might be bad, but we just don't know. And I'm hoping for the good. If it's bad, I'll tell you this. As bad as Obama is and as many violations that guy has had in the Constitution, the Republicans that control the House and the Senate will not impeach him.
Correct.
However, there's enough Republicans in the House and Senate that don't like Trump, and all of the Democrats that don't like Trump. If Trump were to go too far over the edge and start screwing us, I see it quite more likely, regardless of who is in control of the House or Senate, Democrat or Republican, that they would put him under the gun through impeachment. And you actually had something interesting at lunch where you think Hillary's in it for the money.
Yeah, you know, I listen to people on the, and by the way, I abhor Hillary, so I don't want anyone to mistake that I'm supporting Hillary when I say.
You've got to be probably the worst presidential candidate in many generations.
Yes, but I don't see her the way a lot of people on the right see her. They see her as like representing everything that's opposed to their position. I see Hillary as she doesn't really care about the left's position. She doesn't care about the right's position. She cares about Hillary and Bill's wealth and power. And I believe that the Clinton Foundation exists because when Bill Clinton was president, he was getting all those security briefings. You know, he tabulated all that information, and then when he got out of office, and some of that information was still quite warm. And he went around to these big people and said, look what I know, look what I have that I can make public. Yeah. Oh, here's $1 billion for your foundation, Mr. Clinton. Thank you. And I think that Hillary is trying to get into office to play the exact same game. Now, I say that to make the point, the system that she sees in place right now today, and I don't mean Obama, I don't mean Bush, I mean the government structure. The system that she sees in place is a system that she intends to use to achieve her personal power and wealth objectives. She's not going to, in any significant way, change the system that exists because it's the system that she intends to use for her greedy purposes.
I don't discount that. We've seen floating around the internet, and I don't know if it's true or not, something like in 2015, the Clintons donated $1,042,000 to charity in 2015. $1 million went to their own foundation, which they control, and $42,000 went to others. So it wouldn't surprise me they do see.
That's ethical.
Yeah, it is. And we'll be right back in segment 4. Welcome back. It's segment 4, or in Spanish,
Cuatro.
4. This is where we get your viewer emails and we talk about stuff. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But you can still please always send them to us at daveandbillshow@gmail.com. That's where you can get a hold of Dave and I. Also, you can check out most, until I get them updated, of our former shows and see what's going on. Turn other people on to the brilliance, which is Totally Unprepared, at totallyunprepared.info. Not .com or .info. The reason is .info is a whole lot less expensive of a URL on a yearly basis. That's why I got that one. On top of that, in our lovely studio at KPVM TV Studios here in lovely Pahrump, Nevada, the oasis of the desert, we have our carpet update. It showed up in November. It is in late August now. It's still lying piled up right where it was. And not only that, next to it is a whole pile of lights that are in here now that can't be used in the studio because their frequencies interfere with the microphones. They can only be used for B-roll stuff. So that whole pile of crap is sitting not more than 3 feet from me. I don't think I could throw a yardstick without hitting it.
We need to get a picture of that.
We do, yeah. Let's see what's going on. It's turned into the storage areas actually where they're doing this. Right. Anyhow, so
the studio carpet and lighting pile. That's the story we need to do every week.
So with that being said, we actually did get, however, a couple of upgrades. There are some lights that are helping out. We used to have a stand right here blasting on the side of my face. We don't have it. Now it's up on the track. And there are these small little video monitors that are video feeds, known in the industry, that's actually underneath one of the other cameras. Yeah. Once we get it on the other camera, we'll be good because we have one on the third.
What I'm really waiting for, I'm dying for, I'm not going to hold my breath, is actually these red lights.
Oh, the tally lights.
That they actually work, so when he switches from one camera to the other, we know it. I watch the show after we do the show. I would normally watch it in a couple days afterwards. And it looks so boneheaded because, like,
which
camera? Like this camera will actually be on, but there's no light, so I'm talking over here. It's like, we need those little, I mean, how much can it cost? Come on.
A tally light is something simple, and I bet you if I spent 5 minutes, I could make it work, but it's not my camera.
There you go.
And on top of that, we actually have a speaker that has been reintroduced into the studio, which is a nice little upgrade. So although this pile of crap is still over here and growing, some other things have been upgraded. So thank you.
Yes.
Actually.
Be grateful for what we get.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And we were going to talk about a new lawsuit in California. Now, recently, the Ninth Circuit came out, and they ruled in a suit on an area that they weren't even asked about. But what they said was, concealed carry is not a right. It's a privilege. It can be granted by the government if they so want to grant it.
Or withheld.
Yeah, or withheld, and that's up to the state legislature. So
says the Ninth Circuit. Just the Ninth Circuit.
Is overruled more than the other 10 circuits combined. So, with that being said, there is a new lawsuit in California over gun rights. Tell us, Dave.
Flanagan v. Harris.
Good old Flanagan.
Yes, and Harris is the Attorney General for the state of California. Flanagan is the injured party, the plaintiff. He's also been joined by the California Rifle and Pistol Association, representing an entire class, that class being California firearms owners who wish to carry firearms.
Very classy.
Yes, and basically the contention of the suit is, with the Ninth Circuit saying that the state of California can, because concealed carry is a privilege, the legislature can condition that privilege on anything they want.
And has.
Right, so they can really shrink down what you can conceal carry for. And they have completely banned open carry, that based on doing those two things, Flanagan contends in the suit that the state of California is in violation of the Constitution as interpreted in Heller and McDonald by suppressing the rights of California residents to carry a firearm out and about on the streets in some form or other. Basically,
in any form, really.
Well, I mean, you can't say in any form, because if you're the tiny minority, especially in Southern California, that can meet the standards that particular sheriff or police chief imposes, yeah, you can carry. But the point is, when you take a look at the general population, you look at the number of people who are allowed to conceal carry, the number is pitifully, ridiculously small. So Flanagan's contention is, when you look at the population in totality, that the California legislature, by its statutes, has violated the Constitution, the Second Amendment, as interpreted in Heller and McDonald.
And I love it. I have to say that once this happens, one of the things I have been talking about is I wanted to have the right sort of legislation go through and have the right decisions made in court before I were to try to do this. And here's the following. As someone who's a resident of Nevada, I'm a Nevada citizen, I'm only a guest, a visitor into California.
Correct.
As a visitor into California, there is no provision for carrying a gun.
No option whatsoever.
At all.
Correct.
So they completely infringe on my rights of self-protection, which is national. I mean, even if you believe in the 14th Amendment class citizen, the Second Amendment's been incorporated through it. If you go with the original class citizen, of course, it's always been infringed. Now it's infringed through both the Heller and McDonald decisions. So my thought was, go to the neighboring county over here, Inyo County or Kern County, and apply for an out-of-state concealed weapons permit. And they'll say, well, we don't accept that. There's no provision. Now I'm an injured party. I could file suit in federal court.
And let me give you the basis of that suit. It's going to sound completely weird, but very few people actually read old Supreme Court cases. And if the fact that a Supreme Court case the court may have reversed itself over time, or in the case of the Dred Scott case, the 14th Amendment nullified the claim that blacks were no longer citizens, okay, free black slaves were not citizens. The 14th Amendment nullified that provision of Dred, but it nullified only that provision of Dred. If you read the Dred Scott case and you read Justice Taney writing for the court, the dicta, where, the dicta is, in other words, it's not the holding. The holding is very succinct. The court holds that, boom. That's the holding. Dicta is how they got there. Okay. Yeah. And in there, Taney explains, this is very critical to your argument, if Dred was considered by the Constitution of the United States pre-Civil War to be within the class of a citizen of the State of the Union, that then, under our system of government and our system of constitutional jurisprudence, Dred would be allowed to travel from state to state with his firearm on his person. So what the court was clearly stating was that an American citizen living in one of the, I don't know how many states existed at that time, we'll call it 31, I don't know if that's accurate, a state citizen living in one of the 31 states pre-14th Amendment had an absolute constitutional right to carry his firearm upon him as he traveled from state to state. No permit required. Okay? That's current, non-reversed, non-nullified U.S. Supreme Court commentary on what citizens can do with a firearm when they travel state to state.
So that would fit right into me wanting to travel to another state to otherwise restricted. Like I also cannot travel to the state of Hawaii and carry a gun. There's no provision for me to carry a gun there.
Right.
There's
almost no provision for Hawaiians to carry a gun.
There is. As a matter of fact, they have no open carry, and concealed carry is so incredibly restricted. If you look at the very few, you can almost count them on a few dozen fingers and toes, who actually has concealed weapons permits there. They're virtually all retired judges and prosecutors and such.
And if Flanagan prevails, because this is going to go up to the 9th, okay? Hell, it might even go to the U.S. Supreme Court. But if Flanagan prevails, that applies to Hawaii because they're both in the 9th.
Absolutely, and I'm looking forward to that. Okay, another thing that came in, something to do with, because Hillary Clinton was absent over this last week and allegedly taking time off, that there's allegations about health. And I don't know squat about this. I have had my head buried in other projects. So Dave, tell me, what's going on with Hillary's health, allegedly?
Well, we don't really know because
Can we safely say it's terminal, hopefully?
Perhaps, which I think is a really relevant question. I know you meant it joking, but I think it's really relevant.
I wasn't joking. I was hopeful.
Hopeful. We don't know anything about Donald Trump's tax position because he refuses to release his tax.
And he shouldn't have to reduce.
Irrelevant.
Oh,
My point is, and Hillary Clinton is doing the same thing with her medical records. She's refusing to make them public.
And Bill, by the way, was the only sitting president who never released any of his medical records.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Now, the reality is, in the past, Bill Clinton has made statements about Hillary's troubled medical condition in years past. Okay? But of course, now he says she's just fine. Yet, when she is on stage at the podium speaking, she leans against something like a stool or a chair when she speaks. She has to be assisted up a flight of stairs. There was a doctor who had access to some limited information about the medical care she's been receiving for this or that condition. He's actually one of these television doctors. And he said that, this is almost a quote, if I gave her the treatment that her doctors have been giving her, I would be embarrassed to walk into the doctor's lounge, he said, because she's receiving 1950s era medical care.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Now, the fact that she's receiving medical care speaks to the fact there are some problems. The real question, and we don't have an answer because her medical records have not been released, is how extensive her problems are. I personally...
Well, she's definitely mentally deranged. So
yes,
we've got...
That's a whole different area of medical records.
Right.
I personally think she's got significant health problems. And the reason that's so important is because we talked about, well, if you vote for this guy, you're actually taking a vote for Hillary at this point, if I'm right, and she has significant health problems, a vote for Hillary might actually be a vote for President Tim Kaine.
And who the hell is Tim Kaine? I think she picked the most subdued back, because this is all about Hillary. She's not going to share the limelight with anybody. I've never even heard of Tim Kaine before a month or so ago.
Yeah, she certainly chose as beige a candidate as she possibly could.
Yeah.
No vivid colors, right? Somebody who she could name the name. It wouldn't cause a horrible backlash.
Who? We're a bunch of owls. Who?
Yeah, now
Who?
go in the other room and shut up, Tim Kaine. Yeah, that's exactly how she did it.
And it was interesting because at the conclusion of the DNC convention, you had her up there with Obama, which traditionally it's always been the candidate with their second choice.
I think that was clearly a signal of how Hillary Clinton sees Kaine as nothing.
I believe so.
But he could be President Kaine.
Thanks for tuning in. We will see
care.
you next time.